Hello, everyone. Welcome. We can see everyone starting to come into our amazingly fun joint webinar tonight. We are so happy to have you here joining us on a Monday as spring or pre-spring, depending on where you are, is lighting us all up. We get to learn all about homeopathy and it's extra cool timing because it's Homeopathy Awareness Week. So, or come starting, depending on where you are in the world, it's either already started or it starts on Wednesday. But either way, we are right in the zone. So this is beyond a wonderful time to learn all about homeopathy in Canada. So we are so excited to have you all here. We're just going to wait another moment or two till that floodgate kind of slows down of everyone digitally trying to get through the door at once. My name is Erin Ellis. I am here from Canadians for Homeopathy. And it is my absolute honor and privilege to be joined by Marty Valise from Ontario Alliance for Homeopathic Advancement and Christina Barrett, also from the Ontario Alliance for Homeopathic Advancement. But tonight she's wearing the hat of presenter. So we are doing our first joint webinar between OAHA and C4H. So this is a fun and exciting moment, and it's um, beautiful to see collaboration in homeopathy and just really speaks to the amazing power of homeopathy across Canada. So looks like we are starting to have those numbers slow. So I think we are going to get started right away here. I'll just take a moment to quickly introduce our presenter, Christina. Christina Barrett has been a practicing homeopath since 2004, and she has extensively worked in both homeopathic education and pharmacy. She's trained health professionals, worked in health food stores and pharmacy settings, and led collaborative programs between both homeopaths and pharmacists. She is currently the Canadian Homeopathic Pharmacy Association technical committee. She's on the technical committee. So she has quite the resume for us and is going to be a wonderful presenter. So just before I let Christina take it away, I'm just going to let you know that we are, please use the chat. Tell us where you're from. Tell us talk to each other. Tell us a cool homeopathy story, anything you feel like using that chat for. Building community is just a huge part of what I think Canadians for Homeopathy is all about. And I think Oaha also, because we're just trying to reach out and let everyone in Canada know how amazing this is. So please chat away there. But if you do have questions for Christina about her presentation tonight, please put them in the Q&A. So that's just a couple spots right of the chat box at the bottom of your screen. And Christina has graciously agreed to stay for a Q&A afterwards. So we will, don't be shy. Any questions you have for her, pop them in the question and answer box over there. So without further ado, I will hand it over to you, Christina, and let you take it away.
Thank you so much, Erin. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining. I can see a bunch of people putting notifications in the chat. Thank you. I do trainings in my day job for a company, and I always say I love to see where everybody's coming from, see what provinces and backgrounds you're coming from. So please put some information in the chat. Let everybody know you're here. On the Zoom calls, we can't see your beautiful faces, so let's make sure we all say hi to each other and really build up that community. That plays really well into the presentation we're going to talk about this evening. Oh, okay, maybe there we go. So again, this is just an introduction to me. Erin did a much lovelier job than I'm going to do. My name is Christina Barrett, and I've been practicing homeopathy since 2004. Started when I was 5. Tonight, we're going to discuss the history of homeopathy in Canada, exploring its evolution from the 19th century to modern day healthcare. So again, we do so many of these events where we talk about health concerns and how homeopathy can have a real healing effect and help balance your system. Given that it is Samuel Hahnemann's birthday coming up on April 10th, and we're really focused on homeopathy, I wanted to blend two of my favorite subjects together for this presentation to talk about the history of homeopathy, but not just the history of homeopathy, but the history of homeopathy in our great country and where it comes from and its very deep roots here in Canada. So to start, we need to talk about where homeopathy comes from. So we're going to start with homeopathy and its European roots. Again, you're all very experienced homeopaths or uh, uh, patients of homeopathy, so I'm sure you're well familiar with this story, but we do want to make sure that you guys have all the information. So to start, we're going to start with Dr. Samuel Hahnemann, who was the father of homeopathy. He was born April 10th, as I kind of mentioned earlier, in 1755 in modern day Germany. He died July 2nd in 1843, Paris, France. Hahnemann was a brilliant student fluent in many languages and trained as a conventional physician. He became disillusioned with the harsh and often dangerous medical practices of his time, such as bloodletting, mercury treatments, and inducing vomiting. So he came forward with the principle of like cures like, and the use of highly diluted substances attracted attention. This attracted attention across Europe, particularly in Germany, France, and England. And by the 1800s, homeopathy had established a strong presence in European medical circles, gaining patronage from the aristocracy and intellectual elites. So, further to that story, Hahnemann's break from traditional medicine came after a famous self experiment and I will not say this correctly, so I apologize to everyone, the cinchona bark experiment of 1790, while translating a medical text, because that's what Hahnemann decided to do when he stepped away from medicine, was to start translating medical text. He read that this bark, from which quinine is derived, cured malaria because it was bitter and astringent. Curious, he took the bark himself and began experiencing malaria-like symptoms. This led to a key realization. A substance that can cause symptoms in a healthy person can be used to treat similar symptoms in a sick person. The principle became the cornerstone of homeopathy, known as the simila symbolis cure, cure, oh boy, cure neutral, or like cures like. So the three core principles of homeopathy, again, I'm sure you're all familiar with them, but we just want to make sure that everybody is stepping forward on the right foundational stone. First, we have like cures like, a remedy that produces certain symptoms that a healthy person can treat those same symptoms in someone who is ill. An example would be you saw the bark that he was experimenting with there. Another example would be something like coffee, which can cause insomnia. In homeopathy, coffea, a homeopathic preparation made from coffee, might be used to treat insomnia. So the next principle we look at is the minimal dose. Hahnemann found that smaller doses of a substance, especially when diluted and shaken or succussed, had a more potent therapeutic effect. This led to the conception of potentization, where remedies are diluted, often beyond the point of molecular presence, yet believed to retain a healing energy. And we are going to talk more about how modern science is connecting us to that minimal dose later on in the presentation. And finally, we have individualized treatment. Homeopathy looks at the whole person, not just the disease. So again, back in Hahnemann's time when they were treating you, they weren't treating you as a person, they were treating the condition that you had. He really believed that looking at the whole person gave you a better whole picture, and that the symptoms were really the body's way of trying to tell you where an imbalance lay. And this was a completely new concept within medicine at its time and really revolutionized things moving forward. So Hahnemann's legacy really was that he published his first major work, The Oregon of Medical Art, in 1810, the foundational text of homeopathy. His method spread rapidly across Europe, eventually to India, the United States, and of course Canada. And it was practiced and taught in Germany, Austria, and later France, where they gained a large following, including following among aristocrats and artists. So this takes us to our neighbors, the Americans, and I know we've got some squabbling happening right now, but generally we do tend to be very close to our American neighbor. Well, back in the 1820s, we were even more so. Homeopathy crossed the Atlantic to the United States in the 1820s, introduced by physicians who had studied in Europe or who had encountered Hahnemann's writings. It rapidly gained popularity due to its gentler approach compared to the aggressive conventional treatments at the time. And if you look at what was being seen as scientific and what general practice was at the time, it could be very aggressive on the body. By the mid 1800s, the US was home to numerous homeopathic colleges in Philadelphia, New York, and Cleveland. National organizations like the American Institute of Homeopathy, this was founded in 1844, and is in fact the oldest national medical organization in the US. It's even older than the AMA, or American Medical Association. There were hundreds of homeopathic hospitals and pharmacies, and this flourishing movement in the US played a significant role in influencing medical practices in other parts of North America, including for us in Canada. So homeopathy made its way into Canada in the 1840s and 1850s, primarily through immigrant physicians and lay practitioners from Britain and the United States. Some key factors that enabled it to spread across Canada included, number one, a British influence. Many early Canadian settlers, especially in Ontario and the Maritimes, were of British origin. Since homeopathy had taken root in the UK, at that time, even Queen Victoria had royal homeopathic physician, its migration into Canada was relatively seamless. Then it crossed the border through medical exchange with the US. So, with close proximity to the United States, with states like New York and Michigan, Canadian doctors and patients were exposed to American homeopathic practices. American homeopaths often lectured or collaborated with Canadian counterparts. And again, I just want to point out, to Erin's point, you can see the Canadians for homeopathy are working with OHA. We're really excited to have you. Collaboration and working together is really a very deep root in the homeopathic community that we're very, very proud of. There was a high patient demand. Like in Europe and the US, Canadian patients were increasingly skeptical of conventional treatments. Homeopathy offered a less invasive, more holistic approach, especially appealing in rural areas where access to doctors was limited or cost prohibitive. And finally, early practitioners and institutions were founded by the 1860s. Canada had its own recognized homeopaths, its own training programs. In Ontario, for example, some practitioners began establishing dispensaries and homeopathic societies. The Ontario Homeopathic Medical Association was founded in the late 19th century, and we're going to dig into this a little bit more. Again, you may be under the misconception that homeopathy has been a grassroots the whole time and very small in Canada, when in fact it was neck and neck with allopathic medicine for quite a while. Pioneering homeopathy in Canada, we had institutions and leaders of Canada's first homeopathic hospital. In 1887, the Toronto Homeopathic Free Dispensary opened its doors, and the first official homeopathic medical facility in Canada. It provided accessible, low-cost care, especially to the urban poor, and helped introduce homeopathy into mainstream awareness. In 1890, the dispensary evolved into the Toronto Homeopathic Hospital, reflecting growing demand and success in public health outreach. It represented a major milestone in the institutionalization of homeopathy in Canada. So from here, it really went grassroots, and again, was very neck and neck with the allopathic practitioners of that day in how it grew and how accessible it was. So again, just to dig a little bit deeper into the institutional development in Canada, homeopathic colleges and schools, we have the Toronto Homeopathic Medical School, which was founded in 1851. This was one of the earliest formal efforts to offer homeopathy. It was founded in 1883. It offered full medical training based on homeopathic principles, produced many homeopathic physicians who practice across Ontario and Quebec, and faced pressure post-Flexner Report and eventually closed in the early 20th century, which we will talk about a little bit later on in the presentation. Next, we had the Hahnemann Medical College of Toronto, active in the late 1800s. It was a smaller institution, possibly affiliated or in competition with the Toronto-based college at the time. We have limited documentation, but mention in medical directories at the time of this medical college exists. Then we move over to hospitals. There were homeopathic hospitals in Toronto and in Montreal. Back in 1894, the Toronto Homeopathic Hospital was established. It operated until approximately 1910. And again, you're going to hear that year quite a bit through the presentation. It provided general care and surgical services, emphasizing treatment by homeopathic physicians. It served as a training site for students from local homeopathic colleges. We also had the Montreal Homeopathic Hospital, which was founded in 1894. It was active until mid 20th century when it merged with Western General Hospital in the 1950s and was one of the longest standing homeopathic hospitals in Canada. Notably served both English and French speaking populations. And finally, we have homeopathic dispensaries that were available in Canada. We have the Toronto Homeopathic Dispensary. We've mentioned this a couple of times. It was active since the mid 1800s. It offered affordable or free remedies to the public. And I really want you guys to pay attention. We don't talk too much about money throughout the presentation, but this was one of the things that led to challenges for homeopaths is that the Homeopathic Institute or practice of homeopathy was very cost effective for people. So you're going to hear often about how it was actually very supportive of the community by offering free or affordable remedies for people that maybe couldn't have afforded to pay for their medical care at that time. It often is associated with charity work or earlier hospitals. And finally, we have our Montreal Homeopathic Dispensary, which was founded in 1870. It focused on serving the poor and immigrant populations. It offered both medicine and basic homeopathic consultations. So again, you're going to hear how many of these institutes closed or merged or were absorbed by the conventional medical schools during the medical reform movement of the early 1900s. And we're going to address why that happened. By 1935, most homeopathic schools or hospitals had either closed or lost formal medical accreditation through individual practice, though individual practitioners continued. So again, we're going to dive into why such a thriving environment declined and how we were able to bring it back and how you as a homeopathic supporter can help support its resurgence and its continued growth. One of the things I love most about homeopathy in general, but homeopathy in the 19th century Canada, was some of the inclusive roots that it had. So again, education and professionalism were very high on the list of things that it was trying to establish. Homeopathic colleges and societies began forming in Canada in the late 1800s, well before allopathic societies were forming as well. The Ontario Medical College for Women, 1883, included homeopathy in its curriculum, and homeopathic institutions provided a more inclusive and progressive model of education. Again, keeping in mind that in the allopathic system at the time, there was a lot of focus on white men, to be very honest with you. And this really opened up, these schools really opened up options for women and for physical minorities. So female practitioners and midwives were a big focus. Homeopathy was accessible to women as a healing art. Women served as midwives, lay healers, and caregivers, often using homeopathic remedies in community care and continue to do so to this day, everybody. Organizations and dispensaries, homeopathic associations and charitable dispensaries operated in major cities, as we mentioned in the last slide, like Toronto, Montreal, and Halifax, allowing there to be quality healthcare for all. And these clinics often serve the poor and working class, strengthening public trust in homeopathy. Long before regulation, homeopathy was already deeply embedded in Canadians' medical and social fabric, especially through women, communities, and charitable care. Really, the takeaway here is homeopathy's early strength in Canada wasn't just medical, it was social, inclusive, and very grassroots driven. I'm very proud of the roots that we established back then and how we continue to move forward today. Many people are not aware that Canada's first practicing female physician and medical trailblazer was, in fact, a homeopath. She was a pioneer in medicine, born in 1831 in Norwich Township, Ontario, Dr. Emily Stowe. She was denied entry to Canada medical schools and studied in the US as a result. She earned her MD because back in 1867, a homeopath was considered a medical doctor from the New York Medical College for Women, a homeopathic medical institution in the US. She returned to Canada and began to practice medicine, but had to fight for 13 years to be officially licensed and succeeded in 1880. She was the first woman to practice medicine in Canada and the second woman to be officially licensed after Dr. Jenny Trout. She was a founder of the Women's College Hospital. Again, we've talked about this several times in the presentation already. It opened in Toronto based on homeopathic principles and aimed to offer gentler, holistic care to women and families. It moved to a larger facility in 1890 due to high demand and reflected widespread trust in homeopathy in Toronto at that time. She was a champion for women's rights, early interest in herbal healing and homeopathy inspired by her mother, something she and I have in common. My mother was one of my great inspirations to becoming a homeopath. She apprenticed with Dr. John Lancaster in the 1840s and founded the Dominion Women's Suffrage Association in 1893, where she served as a president. So again, we can see Canada's first practicing female physician and medical trailblazer. If you take a look and put her name in your Google search, she will come up as a medical doctor. And she was. She was a medical doctor trained in homeopathic medicine. I do want to make sure that we do a little bit of an overview of the relationship between the American Medical Association, so the AMA, and the American Institute of Homeopathy. This does play into our Canadian roots, and you're going to see how in a minute. It really reflects a broader historical struggle between conventional and alternative medicine in the US. So, a key point while the AMA sought to professionalize and centralize medicine through scientific standards, the AIH, pardon me, emphasized individual care and holistic healing. Their opposing philosophies led to a century long clash that still influences the perception of alternative medicine today. So here we see it was the American Institute of Homeopathy that was actually founded first. It was the first national medical organization in the US established to promote homeopathic medicine. 3 years later, the American Medical Association was founded to take a strong, founded and took a strong anti-homeopathic stance from inception. This is in large part because the AMA was originally a union and not an association. And so they were trying to figure out how to make sure that their practitioners were making enough money to get along and to do really, really well. And homeopathy really worked against that. We had a much more cost effective treatment form, and we're actually stealing some of their patients. So they were really against homeopathy from the beginning. They would say again that they found it to be unscientific. But again, medicine is a science of uncertainty and an art of probability. We really know that as we go through the presentation, you'll see more. It may not be that homeopathy was not scientific, simply the science had not caught up to the practice that we were seeing. So the peak of homeopathy happened in the US in 1875. Numerous homeopathic schools, hospitals, and journals existed, and homeopathy was widely practiced. In 1910, the Flexner Report was released. This was commissioned by the Carnegie Foundation and supported by the AMA. The AMA actually originally tried to work on a similar project to the Flexner Report, but didn't have the clout that they needed to push that initiative forward. And so they went to the Carnegie Foundation and started to work with them to work on the Flexner Report, which we're going to dive into a little more deeply in the presentation. But this led to the closure of most homeopathic medicine hospitals. In the 1940s, homeopathy was marginalized. Most homeopathic institutions closed or were absorbed by the AMA, and allopathic medicine dominated the field. But then we had a resurgence from the 1980s to present, a resurgence of interest in not just homeopathy, but growth in all integrative and alternative medicine. And we're really going to talk about where that came from and why it's so important. So again, just to make sure we have clarity on what the Flexner Report and why the AMA targeted homeopathy was. What was the Flexner Report? It was published in 1910, and again, it was commissioned by the Carnegie Foundation. It was written by Abraham Flexner, an educator. He was not a physician, but he was an educator, and it was aimed to reform medical education in the US and Canada, which in and of itself I don't have a concern with. I do believe that people were probably trying to do a very good thing and trying to make sure that there were more strict rules and conditions and more regulation to make sure that we were taking care of people, but it did have some negative results on especially natural health practices. So it called for fewer medical schools. It had more required more rigorous, scientific training. It had higher admission standards. So again, you were less likely if you came from a marginalized background to be able to make the admission standards required. And it required integration with universities and research hospitals. So again, the schools were very closely now integrated with universities and research hospitals. The impact was that over half of all medical schools were shut down, especially those considered substandard or unscientific. Homeopathic, naturopathic, eclectic, and women's medical schools were hardest hit by this report. So again, I always think it's a good idea to follow the money when we look at this. And I always ask the question, when there's such a dramatic restructuring of an industry, did anyone have any financial interests? And yes, they did, but most were indirectly and strategically connected. So the Rockefeller Foundation entered the scene after the Flexner Report in 1910, and they invested in medical research institutions like Johns Hopkins and Harvard, pharmaceutical science development, and public health infrastructure. The strategic reliance between the Carnegie Foundation emphasized educational reform, and the Rockefeller Foundation fueled the practice and research side of medicine. Together with the AMA, they advanced a vision of medicine grounded in lab-based pharmaceutical science. The result was that homeopathy, herbal medicine, and naturopathy were excluded, not necessarily by scientific failure, but by a system of design. The modern medical industrial complex was born. So beyond ideology, the transformation of the American and thus the Canadian medicine in the early 20th century was deeply influenced by the strategic philanthropic investments of the Carnegie Group, which was tied in with the Rockefeller Foundation. Understanding these financial and institutional dynamics helps explain why certain medical systems were promoted where they worked together and they really all had the same vision, and others were sidelined for over a century. I am a visual person. So again, you can see how this, I'm hoping anyway, this flow chart really shows how the influence of foundations on modern medicine, foundations like the Carnegie Foundation, which was founded in 1905 by Andrew Carnegie, a steel magnate and one of the wealthiest men in the world. Carnegie made his fortune through Carnegie Steel Company, later sold and merged into US Steel. This foundation was founded with the endowment of the U.S. steel bonds, not through ongoing business ventures. So it was a philanthropic company. Its mission was to reform and improve education, not profit. So again, it was not doing this for any type of profit. It didn't have no ties to the pharmaceutical or Rockefeller industries, but its actions aligned with those interests. So if we move on to our next slide, we can see that there was a power behind the pivot, how medical boards were reshaped after the Flexner Report. So what did happen? After the Flexner Report, many U.S. medical schools underwent significant restructuring, especially at the board and leadership levels. This reshaping reflected a deep ideological shift towards a scientific, institutional model of medicine. So medical schools that wanted to survive post-Flexner had to align with the report's standards. This led to a removal of homeopaths, eclectic physicians, and local doctors from the boards. So there was removal from the boards that happened. They were replaced with university-trained scientists, researchers, and administrators tied to some of the elitist institutions we were just speaking of. Who influenced the shift? Again, we see the same people. The Carnegie Foundation did not place board members, but set the reform blueprints. The Rockefeller Foundation, via the General Education Board, funded schools and often influenced hiring, curriculum, and governance through conditional funding. And these indirectly shaped who made decisions at major medical institutions. So the takeaway is the rise of institutional medicine wasn't just about science. It was about who got to lead and which values shaped the future of healthcare. While I'm sure there was a number of improvements that happened after the Flexner Report in 1910, it did reshape medical education, but at a steep cost to homeopathy, women, and racial minorities. So we can see that the Flexner Report did have an effect on homeopathy. Nearly all homeopathic medical schools were closed after the report. Homeopathy was branded unscientific, a branding we're still trying to recover from today. And we're going to talk about why that is definitely not true. And its practitioners were barred from mainstream institutions. Entire systems of care focused on holistic, individualized treatment were discredited. There was a major impact on women in both Canada and the US. Many women's medical colleges were shut down. Institutions that previously welcomed female students could no longer meet the new standards, did not have the correct people on their boards, were not getting the money from the Rockefellers to support. So, unfortunately, they had to shut down. As a result, women's access to becoming physicians sharply declined. And there was an impact on physical minorities. Black medical schools barely survived. 5 of 7 Black medical schools were shut down. Fewer pathways existed for Black physicians, reducing care access in marginalized communities. So, again, we really saw a shift on not only who could practice in medicine, but where medicine would be regularly available. And one last kind of review, what were the shifts before and after the Flexner report? Before the Flexner report, we had eclectic homeopathic physicians. Medicine was really a community-led governance, and there was emphasis on practical patient-centered care. After the Flexner report, university affiliated scientists were really tied in, and were given control over that industry. Foundation aligned administration was put into place, and emphasis went from practical patient centered care to research and lab based science. So the question then becomes, given how far it had come and how quickly it declined, how did homeopathy survive in Canada? And one of the first things I wanted to call out in my research was really it was the power of women and mothers that kept homeopathy alive in Canada. Mothers as healers in many households, mothers became a primary caregiver and health decision maker. Again, you couldn't afford to go to the doctor necessarily, so mothers were really in there. And I believe still to this day, mothers are a real driver for advocating for their children, advocating for better health care. So homeopathy offered them a safe, gentle, affordable way to care for their families. Passing down generational knowledge, women passed on remedy knowledge to their communities. They kept homeopathy alive through oral tradition, books, grassroots networks, and even formal education or regulation, even when formal education and regulation had disappeared and we could no longer have access to these practitioners in our mainstream medical. There was a rise of lay homeopaths, which formal training limited after the Flexner report, but many women became self taught or informally trained by lay homeopaths. And again, in a lot of our public webinars, I'm hoping we're seeing a lot of those women today still joining us on these webinars because we really appreciate what they're doing at home with their families. They often treated neighbors, family, and friends quietly, sustaining the practices through the tough times. They have been advocates and educators, and I really want to call that out today. Again, homeopathy continues to thrive and do well because we have so many advocates and educators in our midst beyond practitioners. Were at the forefront of home health education, organizing workshops, writing guides, advocating for choice in healthcare and for their families. And their efforts built a base of trust and familiarity with homeopathy, especially in rural and immigrant communities. Again, that root tradition that was started in Canada was kept alive by mothers and women. Homeopathy in Canada also survived through practice. So homeopaths continued in private practice, trusted by patients and seeking gentle individual care. We continued quietly, especially in underserved communities. We had underground resilience. Homeopathy was preserved by passionate practitioners. My teacher was one of them. His practice was shut down and restarted many times. He practiced for quite a long time in the Kitchener-Waterloo area. Was a wonderful man. Remedies were still made and sold, and it was kept alive by small circles of believers and healers. Globally, it continued to flourish. Even though we had suppression here in North America, homeopathy thrived outside the US and Canada. In India, the government supported and integrated it into public health. It's widely used in Europe and in South America. The modern revival from the 1970s to now, we have a holistic health movement that has sparked renewed interest. We have a rise in naturopathy, integrative medicine, and homeopathy plays a real part in that. And we have more education, books, and public awareness. And that's from people like you reaching out to your members of parliament, pushing things forward, and continuing to push forward the movement of advocating for the best possible healthcare. I do want to run through some common misconceptions about homeopathy that we still see today, and some of this actually does come from the Flexner report. It's been that long, believe it or not. Number one, homeopathy is the same as herbal medicine. I'm sure most of you on the call know that that's not actually true. Herbal medicine uses crude plant extracts, so they use tinctures. Homeopathy uses ultra diluted substances from plants, minerals, or even animal sources, prepared through the process called potentization. Again, this is based on the principle of like cures like, which we talked about at the beginning of the presentation, and is not just a chemical property of the original substance. I'm fairly certain you guys have seen some stuff on TV that says there's nothing in it. It's just water or sugar pills. First of all, if that was the case, I don't know why we'd have to regulate water or sugar pills, but um, while these remedies are highly diluted, research into nanoparticles and quantum effects shows they still carry biological information. More than just a placebo, clinical studies and millions of case reports show reproducible results, which means there is substance in those homeopathic remedies. Up until very recently, and we're going to talk about that again in a little bit, we just didn't have the ability to see it. Homeopathy is unscientific or outdated. Homeopathy has its own scientific framework, including systematic case taking, remedy proofings, and individualized prescribing. Modern studies continue to explore its mechanisms, especially in areas, as I just said, like nanomedicine, hormone, nanomedicine and energy signaling. So again, we're still diving into how homeopathic remedies work and how the science work. At one time, we thought the world was flat as well. So again, while we can't see everything yet, science is advancing forward as the drug companies start to work on nanoparticle technology to be able to administer drugs with fewer side effects. And as these advances in technology are moving forward, we're actually able to see the nanoparticles that make up homeopathic remedies. Again, concern is always that it's very hard to get research studies for homeopathy because we're not making a lot of money off of it. But again, the fact that homeopathy is unscientific or outdated is actually untrue. It's becoming more and more relevant as technology marches forward. You can just take any remedy for any symptom. Homeopathy is highly individualized. Two people with migraines might get a totally different remedies based off their emotional state, triggers, and patterns. It's definitely not a one size fits all. Homeopathy is slow and only works for chronic illness. This is actually not true. In India, they use homeopathy in acute cases all the time, and it can act quickly in acute cases like fevers, injuries, coughs, or even food poisoning when the remedy matches the symptoms and what the patient's exhibiting well. It's not safe to use alongside conventional medicine. Homeopathic remedies are non-toxic and gentle and can be safely used along with other treatments. It does not interfere with medications, but supports the body's healing response. So again, we are not giving you something to cause an effect. We're stimulating your body into creating its own effect. And finally, this kind of leads to a couple of the other points we had earlier. Homeopathy is just a placebo. If it were just a placebo, why does it work on babies, animals, or plants? Who can't believe in this treatment? Double-blind studies, veterinary uses, and plant studies challenge the placebo-only argument. So again, these are some of the things you may have heard about homeopathy. To challenge, just know that these are some of the logical and scientific answers to those questions. So how much research is happening in homeopathy? This is another thing I hear often. There are no scientific studies. Homeopathy doesn't have any scientific studies. I 100% agree that homeopathy does not have enough scientific studies. And naturopaths will tell you that naturopathic medicine doesn't have enough scientific studies. It would be wonderful to have more, but it's absolutely untrue that homeopathy has none. Currently, as of 2025, there are 286 RCTs on homeopathy. So RCT stands for randomized controlled trial. RCTs are considered the gold standard of medical research. When homeopathy is studied using RCTs, it means researchers are trying to apply the most rigorous scientific methods to test its effectiveness. We have covered, so again, we are using the allelopathic model now as we advance forward in technology to be able to do these studies on homeopathy. The only limit we really have to having more of these studies is finances. So again, the next person who tells you that there's no research on homeopathy, they really do need to check their facts. It's definitely happening in other countries where homeopathy is a priority for research. All right. So after we had a rebuild of homeopathic interest, homeopathic regulation did happen in Ontario. Now, in other provinces, it is not there. I don't think that takes away from homeopathy at all. But this is, again, a nice way to show where homeopathy is, again, trying to bring itself into this century and align with some of the regulatory that allopathic medicine was trying to put in place. And this simply shows that regulation of homeopathy is possible, that we can show that there's can be legislation, we can have scope of practice, controlled acts, standardized guidelines, and conclusion. Homeopathy can be regulated underneath these practices. In Ontario, introduction to regulation, we protect the public from unqualified practitioners. Again, making sure that somebody isn't taking a 3-week course. My course was 7 years. You know, if you've been training as a homeopath, it can take years to get your diploma. Ensure high quality, safe homeopathic care. Provide a company accountability and consistency in that profession. It is regulated under the Health Profession Act of 1991 and framework for regulation under health professionals with the CHO. The Homeopathic Act of 2007 grants the protection only the CHO members in Ontario can use the designation homeopath. So for example, I'm an Ontario homeopath. I am regulated under the CHO. Scope of practice is defined by the Homeopathic Act of 2007, assessment of body system, treatment using homeopathic techniques to promote, maintain, or restore health. Again, we're not claiming we treat illness, we're restoring overall health. And again, homeopathy is under the controlled acts. We are not authorized to perform controlled acts, administer substances via injection. We must adhere to public domain practices and CH standards. The bottom line here is this: within other provinces, you're going to have homeopaths that aren't regulated. This doesn't mean that they're not good practitioners. They could be wonderful practitioners. I simply put this slide in to say that you can see where homeopaths have taken steps to try and align with the mainstream medical to give that form and regulation. And so it is a doable thing. And there are many homeopaths in many provinces that could easily fall within the confines of the regulation that we see in Ontario. So again, this leads to the point that it is shaped and structured in such a way that we are showing quality to our patients. Okay, we're going to talk about, we've talked about the past, we've talked about where it came from. Where do we see the future of homeopathy? Where do we see homeopathy going in Canada? One of the things I love to talk about in regards to homeopathy, we kind of touched on when we talked about the placebo effect. We're seeing a vast growth of this. Again, Europe tends to lead the way for us, and then we follow. So in homeopathy, agro-homeopathy is huge in Europe. It involves the application of homeopathic remedies to plants and soil to enhance growth, increase resistance to pests and disease, and improve overall crop yield. It's eco-friendly. It offers sustainable alternative to chemicals, fertilizers, pesticides, reducing environmental pollution. It helps with soil health, maintaining soil fertility, and promotes ecological balance. It's extremely cost effective. Again, homeopathy is always extremely cost effective. That's one of our barriers. It provides an affordable solution for farmers seeking natural agricultural practices. And research findings, studies have demonstrated that homeopathic treatments can alter the phytochemical profiles of medicinal plants, leading to increased production, secondary metabolites, and essential oils beneficial for human health. We've seen this with animals as well, where in animals that are treated homeopathically, they're now doing research studies on their offspring and generations after, and they actually have less health concerns when they've been treated homeopathically. So again, Europe continues to lead the way, and there are extremely exciting things coming. We want to make sure that Canada is well positioned to start moving some of these wonderful initiatives forward. And that really comes, again, as I said, it continues to be grassroots from people like you, pushing it forward, making sure you're requesting it, seeing your practitioners, reaching out to your MPs, advocating for this beautiful form of natural health care. Finally, we have nanotechnology in homeopathy. Concept research indicates that homeopathic remedies may contain nanoparticles of the original substance, even in higher dilutions. These nanoparticles are believed to interact with the biological system in unique ways. So, mechanism enhanced bioavailability, nanoparticles can improve the delivery and efficacy of therapeutic agents. Uh, Low doses of nanoparticles might stimulate adaptive beneficial responses in biological systems. So, from a scientific perspective, the presence of nanoparticles in homeopathic solutions offers a potential explanation of their biological effects, suggesting a bridge between traditional homeopathic practices and modern nanoscience. So, when people are telling you that homeopathy is old and out of date, really, I believe in my lifetime, we'll have a much clearer understanding of how homeopathy works. And these innovations highlight the evolving landscape of homeopathy, integrating traditional practices with contemporary scientific research to explore new therapeutic potentials that are not only cost effective, but so wonderful for the body and keeping our families healthy. With all of that, there are challenges to homeopathy in Canada in particular. We do have regulatory pressures right now. In my day job, I do also work for a supplement company, so this doesn't just apply to homeopathics. But Health Canada's new regulations are putting forward stricter labeling requirements. This will be effective June 2025. It applies to all natural health products, including homeopathy. The concern here being, unfortunately, the government has taken a drug model and applied it to natural health care. We don't have the same money. We don't have the same health concern. We don't have the same need for transparency. And really, there wasn't an engagement from the shareholders in these natural health spaces to figure out how we bring about the same transparency without restricting the availability of remedies to our patients. So this has been an ongoing battle with us for a while. Again, reach out to your MPs. We're in a voting time, everybody. Make sure that they're aware that you want to know that homeopathy will remain readily available in Canada. We know that there's scientific and education with the regulatory burden, ongoing scientific skepticism, and difficulty integrating into mainstream. Again, with the biases that have been there for a while, that's why I brought up regulation in Ontario. It shows where we are actually trying to integrate and work together, but it is a difficult upstream battle, and definitely the supports of our grassroots community help us continue to try and make sure that we're integrating as much as possible. We do have regulatory burden and transparent research. Again, we want to make sure that we want to be transparent. We want to make sure that we are being transparent on what's available without reducing the SKU count or what's available to the public to make sure that you are getting everything you need from your homeopath. Scientific and public skepticism. Again, this goes back, if you can believe it, over 100 years. We're still viewed by some medical professionals as a pseudoscience, with misconceptions affecting perception and trust. Advocacy and education efforts, public forums and webinars like we're doing today, really do help to get the word out there. Outreach to educate consumers and professionals. Again, we want to make sure we're integrating with other professionals and really advocating for homeopathy and highlighting emerging research in nano and individualized medicine. We're seeing a really large push from pharma to go into nanotechnology and really into individualized medicine. We've been doing this the whole way along. Homeopathy is really a future. We were way ahead of our time and will continue to be so. And finally, with the regulatory burden, transparent research, and patient education, sustainability and regulatory solutions, we do not generate a lot of income as homeopaths. The homeopathic remedies are very inexpensive, are very easy to produce, do not create a lot of waste. But this does mean that to have the regulation, the transparency of research, patient education, all of this costs money. And again, because we're not charging large amounts, and hopefully our patients are taking our homeopathics and then no longer requiring them, continuing to fund groups like the Canadians for Homeopathy and the Ontario Alliance for Homeopathic Advancement allows us to continue to stay ahead of these pressures. So if you are interested in becoming more of an advocate for homeopathy, and we encourage you to please do so, the Ontario Alliance for Homeopathic Advancement, you can see the link here. We want to raise awareness and build future where homeopathy is recognized, accessible, and thriving. This is your time to connect, collaborate, and create lasting change. So to learn more about the Ontario Alliance for Homeopathic Advancement and how you can support homeopathy, please visit the link there that I've got there in the slide. Associate membership is available to anyone who wants to support the OHA's work, OAHA's. This includes students of homeopathy, other healthcare practitioners, and members of the general public. We do want to continue to have opportunities for you guys. So we're hoping that you'll join us on our webinar, our next webinar, the Ontario Alliance for Homeopathic Advancements, next webinar with the Canadians for Homeopathy on May 22nd. The lovely Marty, who was on with me a little bit earlier this evening, will be hosting or will be narrating, and she will be teaching on homeopathy for allergies. So today was like a dramatically different subject. We didn't go into any remedies or how to do anything, but she's going to tell you how to take care of your families during allergy season. It will be a wonderful webinar, so please make sure you register. We want to make sure we have your spot and that we're sending you information as it becomes available. We also want to thank the Canadians for Homeopathy. Again, if you are curious about anything we talked about this evening, you want to keep informed, they also have great webinars, and we're going to be doing a lot more collaborations, keeping us up to date on the current situation of homeopathy in Canada. So visit them at their website there, email them for more opportunities, subscribe to their newsletter to stay up to date on what's happening in Canada and the challenges and advancements homeopathy is making. And be sure to support the webinars on homeopathy. It would be very, very much appreciated. Their next webinar, which we're again collaborating on, would be Monday, May 5th, and they're going to talk about homeopathy, the journey to wholeness. So again, for those home subscribers or those home, I can't even talk anymore, people using homeopathy at home, this will be a wonderful webinar to figure out how do you journal and really look after your family to understand what remedies you could be recommending for different conditions. And for those who want to know a little bit more about me and my practice, this is my website. And we want to thank you so much for joining us this evening. I think I've done enough talking, at least until I answer some questions.
Thank you so much, Christina. That was absolutely, absolutely amazing. Fabulous. There was a nice liveliness in the chat. We actually don't have any questions in the Q&A at the moment, but so people throw them on in there if you have them. But one thing that was really, really interesting in the chat was a couple of pop culture references to homeopathy were mentioned. So Jennifer, who actually is actually presenting the next webinar, is here. Hi, Jennifer. We're looking forward to hearing from you in a few weeks. And she mentioned that in Murdoch Mysteries, one of the characters is based on Dr. Emily Stowe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I have seen that one too.
that's
There's
cool.
quite a few, and it's really wonderful. But even I don't know if you're a homeopath and you ever watch whenever they mention homeopathy in TV, you just like shudder a little bit because the herbal thing that comes up often. They're like, "Oh yeah, you're gonna get poisoned if you take that homeopathic." I'm like, "Oh dear God!" Like I just so like
You do
yeah,
shudder, that's right. And then every
yeah,
once in a
there's
while
a shudder.
it works out well. I can't remember, there's a British show. I'm sure someone here will know. It was a well-known British show, but anyway, they had an episode with the homeopath in it, and it was actually really accurate. It was really remarkable. It was yeah. And someone else mentioned that on Call the Midwife. Um, I think that's a British show. I'm not super familiar with it.
It
They
is. Yep.
prescribe arnica. Yeah. So yeah, it's fantastic. So, and now we've got a couple questions popping up. Um, Someone was asking if you could go back over the fact about Black women physicians training centers were closed.
It
I
wasn't Black women in
yeah.
specific. There were a lot of women's schools that were closed, but there were I think it was 5 out of 7. I'd have to go back to the slide. Isn't that terrible? But I believe but there were schools for African Americans, period, men or women, that were closed. And again, I don't know if women were accepted at that time, but for sure there was Black men and then women at that time. Anybody who was, respectfully, this is going to go over super well, but anyone who wasn't a white male was pretty much eliminated at that time. So, again, that there was a real drive for that to make it a profitable profession at that time. And again, it was just really marginalizing women and then African American people in general.
Wonderful. Thank you for clarifying. Someone is asking if you know anything in particular about the history of homeopathy in British Columbia.
Not as much as I definitely should. Again, because like we could have been on here for 4 hours if we gotten into BC and then out in Nova Scotia. Again, my family's Irish, so there was a large homeopathic community out there as well. But we just kind of went with the ones that had the foundational buildings and schools and all of that. It was mostly Quebec, Ontario, but I'm sure there's a rich history in BC as well, and it would be really interesting to dive into that a little bit deeper.
Yeah, it'd be actually interesting to do each of the provinces and territories a little bit, but
Oh my gosh,
it would
so
be
much so,
amazing.
yeah.
Yeah, who wants to write a book? Anyone? Yeah.
Yeah,
I
right? There's a
I'd
book
read it.
title.
I'd buy it. Yeah.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
Someone is we actually do have a request, and that's perfect because I was going to ask you too if you could go back one slide so we can see your contact information too.
Okay.
Um yeah, so Christina of course works as a homeopath as well as wearing many other hats. So you can find her at healingbycaring.com. And then someone is asking if there's a way to see where the Canadian political parties or candidates stand on new natural health product regulations coming into effect.
Absolutely. So, number one, the CHFA, Canadian Natural Health Food Association, is doing a lot of advocating and lobbying for natural health products in general. So they will be able to kind of look at that. But honestly, we're in an election right now. Message your MP and say this is an important piece for me as somebody who's looking for natural health care, and ask them themselves, where do they stand? Currently, it's the current government that's got this legislation in place. So again, they're not going to know that we're unhappy with it unless we come forward and tell them that that's the case. We're about to go into an election. This is the time to reach out to your MP and just whichever way they stand, let them know. I don't feel it's ill intent on anybody's part. I feel like there was a push forward to get this done quickly. And so, if you go to your MP and just go, listen, I just feel that regulation could have been done with a lot more consideration and thought from the shareholders on how we make this transparent. It really does affect the homeopathic community quite a bit more because all of our remedies it's not just the name of the remedy, but each of the potencies. Like it affects all of that, and they all have to change in labeling and makes it very expensive at $8 or $9 or $10 a tube for somebody like Boron to keep practicing or to keep producing. We just really want to make sure that we're not limiting those remedy options. So again, we all know in homeopathy, you have your regulars, your arnicas, your lycopodiums that everybody uses. But for those rare remedies, for those people that need that rare remedy, we want to make sure that cost isn't so prohibitive that now we can't have that. And certainly we know that it is a safe modality. So safety should not be a concern when we're looking at that regulation within homeopathy.
What fabulous advice that this is a particularly excellent time to reach out to your MP. Like this,
Absolutely.
it's a yeah, voices are landing louder right now. So that's fabulous advice. Um,
Honestly, I don't like to tie things to parties. I think call your MP and ask them and see what answer they give you. See what answer they give you and what the reasoning is behind their belief. And let them know that it's a voting issue for you because it certainly is for me.
great language too. It's a voting issue for me, right? Just even that
Yep.
simple statement is wonderfully said. I know this is getting a little bit, maybe a little bit away from the presentation, but someone is asking about homeopathic associations and groups. Maybe you could just speak a little bit about that current landscape in Canada, if you feel comfortable with that, Christine.
There, we are working on, there are generally the ones that I would recommend today, like the Ontario Alliance for Homeopathic Advancement would be a group. The Canadians for Homeopathy would be a group. As it pertains to associations, there are several. So again, look, like if you're a homeopath looking for a community, reach out to the Ontario Alliance for Homeopaths or the Canadians for Homeopathy, and they can direct you based on your area, because there are several different groups and associations all over the country. The key is get involved and make sure you're involved with a group, and these would be the two that I would be recommending for sure.
Fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think both of our groups are just really interested in being in touch with the public and, having conversations, and yeah, educating and all that
Well,
stuff.
I think, Erin, homeopathy in Canada has been grassroots, everybody get involved, inclusive, all from the, like, it's all from the very beginning. We want to continue to be that way. But we don't have large associations that are in there advocate. Like, it really does come from a grassroots place. And again, when you look at what mainstream medical, or even I work in the naturopathic field, even what they can charge for what they give versus what we charge, there is a discrepancy, and that's what's made us wonderful. We're available for anyone. Cost is not prohibitive. However, this does mean that you don't have large dollars coming in to pay for a lobbyist or to pay for. So we really need the whole community to pull together to ensure that we continue to have a homeopathy thriving in Canada.
And that just harkens right back to what you were saying about how the grassroots, the sort of kitchen table, homeopathic practitioners were really what kept it alive. That really is partly our magic, right? Partly our
It
secret.
really is. It really is.
It's
It's
very
our strength and
special.
our weakness at the same time, but that's why everybody needs to get involved.
That's
Volunteer for the groups if you don't have money. Volunteer. They're always looking for volunteers to help with webinars, to help with all kinds of things. So again, if you don't have money to donate right now, I know a lot of people are tight. Volunteer some time. They would love to hear from you.
exactly. Or if you, yeah, and subscribe to either organization, yeah, time and subscribe and money are both valuable resources that and skill sets that we all like and treasure. Fantastic. I think that's sort of the end of the questions as far as I can tell. We've put the links in the chat for both associations, and I think I'll try and do that one more time. Marty, do you have anything to add, or is there anything else from that we want to mention?
I
People
think you
in
ladies have done a wonderful job. Just again, support us. Join us at the next webinar on May 22nd, where I will be presenting on homeopathy for allergies. I'd love the support. And yeah, everybody and anybody who is interested in homeopathy, who is a friend, bring them along. And let's make this community a lot bigger.
If they wanted to know
In
more, we have
numbers.
two. We have the one coming May 5th and the 22nd. So there's lots of opportunities for you to get in and bring your friends along and have them learn more about this beautiful natural modality for sure.
Thank you. Well said, both of you. And this was a lovely collaboration between our organizations. And thank you, everyone, for attending. Thanks for your engagement in the chat. We had someone from Australia, I think was our farthest one.
Oh,
Texas.
amazing.
We had coast to coast in Canada. I saw New Brunswick. I saw an island off the coast of BC. I couldn't memorize all the spots in between, but we did have some people from all over. So thank you all for being here and making it so lively and just so community oriented. Let's keep building this beautiful community who loves homeopathy, especially in Canada. And we will see you all next time. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.